We wanted to show you how to replace that sending unit as well as your pickup in an old tank to give it new life. Throw that away, we don't need it. Always use recreational fuel. Subscribe so you see when we post the video installing this. Hey, it's Tom from Tom's Toons. Today I'm gonna be giving this older 20-gallon or so tank a little refresh. So came in with the boat that we're doing right now, and we were gonna replace it with a brand new one, but those are on back order and have been for quite a while. And the truth is, this is a perfectly good tank. So if we didn't use it on this boat, we'd use it on another boat or another project at some point. But the issue was that the fuel gauge would never read accurately. So that could be the fuel gauge itself, or it could be the sending unit. But this boat's from the mid-90s. This is where the tank came off of. So we're just gonna go ahead and replace our fuel pickup just to make sure that that hose is in good shape. We have a kit from Moeller for that. This tank is only about 11 inches deep, so there's a couple different sizes, and these are, you can 100% cut these to make them work for your boat. And then the other thing we're gonna replace is our fuel level sender. So this is a C-Choice kit, and this again is adjustable. There are a couple pins, we'll show you how that works. That goes in the middle, and that's what actually indicates the fuel level to your gauge. So that's where your wires for your sending wire and your ground hook in there. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna tackle this project. I've already scrubbed the tank down, got all the old grime off of it. Make sure it's real dry before I start taking out the sender or anything where water could run in. But it's mostly empty anyway, so I don't have to worry about that so much. So first place I'm gonna start is by getting the pickup out. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that out, and then I'll replace the pickup first. So this is a barb fitting that connects to the fuel line. I'm just gonna go ahead and take that right off, and that'll leave me with just the pickup, which looks like this in there. That's where the barb will go in. We'll put a little Teflon tape on that and drop this into place. Pretty common. This is a 9/16 wrench, and then I'm gonna have to hold the head of my pickup with another wrench just to keep from putting so much stress on the plastic. Because if I were to reef on that, I might end up ripping the plastic or breaking something, and I don't have time to fix that kind of stuff. I always have a rag nearby when I'm doing this because, well, got away with it. No gas in the line. I've got to get this pickup head out. So it's threaded down into a bigger nut. And all I need to do on that is get I'm gonna use my big boy on that nut, and then another adjustable wrench, just the way I'm going. And then I'm just gonna go in opposition. This is a little bit stubborn. I had to switch wrenches to give myself more leverage, but we're just gonna thread that right on off. There's a bunch of dirt right around here. We wanna make sure that none of that goes into our gas tank. This boat will be getting a water fuel separator. I'll do that as a video too. So I'm just gonna wipe that dirt away, make sure nothing falls in. Out we come with our pickup. This has a little screen on the end. The new ones, a lot of them don't, because a lot of times you're gonna run that micro filter in your water fuel separator. This is the old one. Tendency, if these fail on you, they sitting in gas, or especially if you're running ethanol in your fuel, always use recreational fuel. They tend to corrode and break down, or you can see up here is kind of some chalky stuff. That tends to eventually cause corrosion, and this can break, or the end will break off, or this will just drop right in because it rots right off the top. This one's actually in okay shape, but since we're in here, we're doing it, we're gonna do the whole thing and get it done. What I'm gonna do to make my life easy, we already know that this picks up fuel well at this level. So my new one, my old one, I'm gonna cut my new one right to that level. We'll drop it in, make sure it fits. But we do essentially want this on the bottom, and if you look how it comes from the factory, it's cut at an angle, so that allows fuel to flow in. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this down. I'll mark it first. I'm gonna cut it where the screen ends, not where the hose ends, because I wanna get it down to the bottom. You could cut this with a sharp knife. I'm gonna go ahead and just heat up a razor. We'll cut it, and then I can make my angled cut and carve out what it needs to, how it needs to look, so that this drops in there and does what it needs to do. So I just heated up my box cutter with my torch, and actually we end up with that same look that we had before. I'll clean this up once it cools down, and then we'll get that ready to drop in. Make sure before you drop this in your fuel tank that everything's cleaned up on it. Nothing's gonna break free and end up floating up. Again, run a water fuel separator. That's gonna save you a lot of headaches. But we're ready to drop this in, make sure that it fits. And looks good. So I'll put a little bit of thread tape about midway up so we catch a little bit of that just to get a really nice seal. And we know we're down in the fuel because this tank is almost empty and this was getting a little bit of gas. Just one quick wrap with thread tape and down we go. Once you get this snug, you can tighten it or loosen it a little bit more depending where you want to route that fuel line. This is actually going to route right up to a water fuel separator. So in our case, it's not a huge deal. I'm going to end up pointing it back slightly so they can run to the fuel separator, down through the floor and back to the engine. We're just going to put a new brass barb fitting in there. I got to grab one from the store. We'll do that at the very end. But let's move on to our sending unit. We'll tackle that. So it's got a couple wires coming off. That's typical. We're going to trash this one, so not a big deal. I'm just going to cut that free. And then I'm going to take my 5/16 bit and go around, and we're just going to loosen. This is essentially 5. It's kind of a star pattern, pretty universal for every tank. We'll loosen all these out. This whole thing is just going to come right out with the sending unit, the float, and everything. Depending on the sending unit you buy, you might need to save that hardware. But this has been in there for a long time. I'm going to get my pry bar. Just need to pop that. There's a rubber seal. You'll have a new one, hopefully, with your new kit, because this one's corroded, dried out. But this whole thing is going to come right out. And your piece on the end there is your float. Now, this is what actually triggers that fuel gauge to fire, and over time these just tend to wear out. They're not as accurate. Your float might get saturated and not do its job. Your connection here might get corroded, that's sending the signal to the sender. So many things can go wrong with these, so that's why it's pretty common to need to replace them every now and then. But our new sender will go in place of this. Sitting up a little bit high in the down position, so I've got a little bit of a little gap there. We certainly don't want it resting on the bottom, but we could get a little bit closer. Keep in mind, this tank, if you can see it, it does sag a little bit in the middle, which is common. But we'll go ahead and try to match it up pretty close to this, maybe a little bit longer. This is my new one, so if I put it in there as it is, we're gonna hit the bottom, obviously. So what I'll do is just bend my wire up, and I think we'll actually be in a really good spot if I just give it a little bend up or to the side to where it can float up. So I used my old sender for reference, and I knew I wanted to go a little bit deeper, so I got that. When I dropped this in, I just looked down to make sure that I'm not hitting bottom before, but then also I want to drop it in and pull it up. And like I told you before, this tank is almost out of gas. I'm still getting this wet with fuel. That's a good sign. That's where I want it. So I got to looking in that gas tank a little bit. Quite a bit of sediment. So I went ahead, I drained it out. Looks really good now. I don't really see any gas or any sediment in what's left, but we got most of the gas out. So we'll start with fresh gas, never gonna hurt. We eliminated the chance of all of that, just dirt, corroded stuff over the years that's fallen in there. Less chance of that plugging everything up. I like where it is. We'll continue on now. I like to go ahead and put all of my machine screws through the metal, through the grommet first. Sometimes you have to kind of maneuver it in order to fit. And then we can drop this back in and line up our screws. Your tank will have built in or threaded into the plastic studs. So that's where these machine screws will thread into. When we get them lined up, we'll just get them started. I get it started with my impact, and then I'm going to hand tighten these with a screwdriver. That is in. There's a nut and a split washer that will go on there for now just to keep them in place. but that's where we will put our sending unit or sending wire. So just keep in mind with these aftermarket systems, you might have to work with the screws that lining them up. The grommet might be a little squished, but it will go in there, and then this nut and wash will go on top. That's where our sending wire will come off, and then our ground as well. So we'll have a sending wire, a ground, and then we'll put another ground in just underneath one of these screws to the fill cap to prevent spark. But while I've got this all off, we drained it, I'm gonna clean this up a little bit. We'll insert our brass barb, and then this is essentially ready to go back up in the boat. We'll put our fill tube on and everything, but we wanted to show you how to replace that sending unit as well as your pickup in an old tank to give it new life. One last quick look. Now that everything's in place, we replaced our brass barb fitting with a new one. We did the vent hose on our vent. We have that new pickup in place and the new sender in place. This green wire will be my ground to the fill spout, just to reduce the chance of spark. We have mounting brackets. These are new, that will go hold the tank down on the floor with a couple screws. We have our fill neck hose on. We are ready to go on up and wire this in. All said and done, you're looking at, $100 or less in all of these components to get your old tank brought back up to new standard, to replace a new 20-gallon tank just like this, and it wouldn't even have some of your fittings or hoses. You're talking $250, $300. Great savings by reusing this, and it should last them a really long time. Stay tuned and make sure you subscribe. Following up this video is gonna be installation of a water fuel separator filter, a must-have in my opinion on your boat to prevent moisture and debris from getting into your motor and causing all kinds of problems. Easy to install, plenty of space to do it. Typically on a pontoon boat, could be on the inside of the boat or the outside. Subscribe so you see when we post the video installing this.